Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. Leading pantomime company Evolution Productions will this year celebrate its 20th anniversary with 10 productions, all running at the same time at theatres right across England. I spoke to the founders of Evolution, husband and wife Paul Hendy and Emily Wood, about their upcoming panto season and about what goes into making their pantos. But first, I referred Paul to our last conversation for the BTG podcast earlier this year about his play The Last Laugh, which since then has had a very successful run at the Edinburgh Fringe and is now scheduled for a West End run early next year. Incidentally, the references to the British comedy act The Crazy Gang refer to a conversation we had previously about my dad having seen them late in their career in 1950. Can we start off talk about The Last Laugh? It's sort of a continuity of the last time we spoke. Because last time we spoke, it was about to open, well, you were just rehearsing for it for Edinburgh, weren't you? And now it's going to London.
Which is, brilliant. Can't believe everything you could hope for. You know, it's what you want when you go to Edinburgh. You know, Edinburgh is very much, it's a shop window and in many ways a bit of a loss leader. You know, you take it up there, you know, I'm very surprised if people can make money in Edinburgh. Yeah. So it's about getting up there and showing it off. And sure. Well, a lot of people came and you know, it sold out, which was great. Yeah. And then Jamie Wilson, who's brilliant, came up literally on the last day of the run. He arrived with like 10 minutes just before curtain up. Not that you have curtains in Edinburgh, but 10 minutes before we started, you know, watched it. And then at the end, he just turned to me and he said, "We'll take this to the West End," which was brilliant. So, couldn't be more exciting. Yeah, the guys are thrilled, you know.
As simple as that.
It sounds simple, but it was how it happened. So everything we could have wanted for it, you know. And the reaction from the public was great. You know, quite overwhelming. They all seemed to really love it. You know, I think if you remember those comedians, there's something about it. You know, the nostalgia, the poignancy that seems to touch people. Yeah. So
that's something to start with, but you need to give them a little bit more than just a bit of nostalgia. I know when I saw it, it seemed to be mostly sort of my age and older in the audience. I don't know whether that was universal, but you need a bit more than nostalgia for the West End, don't you?
You do, absolutely. And I think it's got that. I think it's got the depth to it as well, you know, about what makes people not just like Eric, Bob and Tommy, but what makes people want to entertain, what makes people want to get up there and try to be funny, you know. And obviously comedy and laughter is very important, you know, and sometimes it's underrated how important it is to human nature and what we need, why we need laughter. So I think it's, you know, when you dig deeper, you do get all the nostalgia and poignancy, but it says something about humanity as well, I like to think, and about why we need people to be funny, you know. I think so. You know, we need those comedians, and going back in history, you know, jesters. It's what they are. We've always needed. We need to laugh. So no, it's real.
Part of the debate at the heart of the play as well, isn't it? Of course.
Exactly. Exactly.
Before then, between now and then, of course, it's panto season, which you're both a little bit busy with. I'm assuming at the moment in different parts of the country.
Yes.
So how is it going with your 10 pantos?
Oh, well, going really well. Busy, really busy, but that's good. You know, we always say if we're not busy at this time of year, then there's something wrong. And we didn't like the COVID year when we weren't busy at this time of year. So it's going well. We've got half the shows in rehearsals now. So half are about to open and the other half go into rehearsals over the next few days. So, busy old time, but it's good. Everyone's great. Everyone's doing really well. Sales are good. Sales are up this year, which is a huge relief. You know, I think theatre really feels back and sort of cemented again after the tricky years. We're having a really good season so far.
So are you still keeping an eye on things post-COVID? Is that still in the back of your mind?
Yeah, it is. It is slightly, in as much as I think it shook us all. I think it showed us all that you couldn't always rely on the audiences being there and the theatres always being there. It's probably made us all appreciate performing more as an audience member. Personally, it's made me appreciate theatre and theatre going more, for sure. But it's nice just to be able to invest more and just have confidence again, how it used to be, you know, the confidence to invest in some big special effects and new sets, that kind of thing. You know, that's been good.
Yeah. And how about the cost of living crisis? Does that affect panto, or is this something that people actually work up to and save up for?
Well, we always make sure that we have accessible prices, because I think it's really important to have a way in for people if they're not your usual sort of theatre going audience. I think it's really nice for them to feel that they can afford it, they can come and join the club, you know. But I think what we've found is actually if you're giving them something that's really good quality, people don't mind spending, and they do value that experience, that family experience. Yeah. And I certainly find, God, I've sort of had enough of material things, and you want to have experiences with your family. And we see that a lot. Yeah. So I think cost of living is there. People are aware of it, but if they know it's a good spend, it's worth it, and they do it. And the sales are showing that people do want to get out and see theatre.
So what are the highlights you've got across your productions this year?
Do you want to do highlights?
Well, what we'd like, I mean, we're producing 10 shows this year right across the country. I'm currently at the Marlow Theatre in Canterbury. We've got shows as far as York and Sheffield, and then over to Crawley and Shrewsbury and everywhere in between. And what we always try to do is make all of our shows spectacular. So, you know, what we don't want is that people might come to a big theatre like the Marlow Theatre in Canterbury and, oh, wow, you'd want to see and expect to see a spectacular show here. But also, if you go to one of the other theatres, they're all big and they're all spectacular and they're all sort of, if they're like our children, aren't they? We don't have a favourite. They're all equally spectacular. We put as much time and effort and love and energy into each and every one of them. So it's, I mean, we do, we've got lots of special effects. We've got some extremely talented performers. A lot of it comes, for me, down to casting. You have to get the casting right. You have to get people who can genuinely do it. And it's such a specific genre and such a specific art form that it's hard to find people who can really do it, because you might be the greatest actor in the world, but you may not be able to do pantomime, so we try very hard to find those people who can really, really do pantomime. I think that's a trick in itself.
Yeah, I remember when panto had a bit of a dip. I think it was back in the 90s.
It was when Paul was performing.
When I was performing. Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I do look back actually to when I was performing, and I think there was a dip and a lull in the quality of productions then. With that, absolutely no disrespect to any of the producers or theatre makers who were doing pantomime then, but it was. I don't think people were investing as much money then as they do now. I mean, we invest into these shows, as do Crossroads, as do other producers. The quality of these shows now, they're West End standard. I'm currently directing the Marlow Theatre in Canterbury, and you could put this set and these costumes and these actors onto the West End stage. That's the benchmark, if you like. Whereas I don't think that was always the case. I mean, there were people like Paul Elliott, E&B back in the day who were doing high quality shows. But I think there's a lot more investment now than there's ever been in pantomime, because because it continues to be successful right across the board. So it means, I mean, we've currently sold 86,000 tickets here at the Marlow, which there are only 50,000 people in Canterbury. So to sell 86,000 tickets is incredible. But what that means is you can invest in next year's show, because we know next year we'll end up selling 95,000, 100,000 tickets. So, you can constantly constantly invest in the shows, which means the public get better shows constantly.
Yes,
So, I think pantomime's in a very good place at the moment.
I think that dip was also partly because of, you said about casting, and I think at the time there were a lot of stars, like people from Gladiators the first time round, who, there were names on the bill, but they weren't necessarily panto performers at all, were they?
Yeah, I mean, I think pantomime's always been, so I never mind that. In fact, we've got one of the new Gladiators in our show in Sheffield, so I personally never mind that, because if you look historically at pantomime, it's always been like that. It's not as if everybody you've ever used, we were just talking about the crazy gang. It's not that if you went back to the 1950s and earlier, it's not as if everybody in pantomime would have been, a really experienced comedian or performer. They'd have used special acts, or they would have used little gimmicks, let's call them, to try and get people in. So I think that is part of pantomime, and it always has been, and it always will be, because you have to attract the public. The trick is, and this is where I sort of do my job, is to tailor the show to those people's skills, maybe, rather than just putting them in and expecting them to be a wonderful actor. You have to tailor the show, don't you, and write it specifically for those people. So maybe that's what's changed.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's what's changed. Whereas maybe years ago they just used to put them in and expect them to be, an actor and to be able to act. Whereas I think that's changed now. Maybe.
I think the special skill of a panto performer is also how you relate to the audience. You can sometimes see inexperienced panto performers in that they sort of look blankly at the proscenium arch opening and they're not really communicating with the audience. They're sort of looking towards them, aren't they? So how do you encourage that?
Well, once again, I think it's a very definite skill, and there are some people who are just brilliant at pantomime. Their particular skill set and their personality totally suits pantomime. And maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, they would have been big stars in their own right, because they would have been in the crazy gang. I'm thinking of people like Damien Williams, who's our Dame in Sheffield, and Ben Roddy, who's our Dame here, and Bob Golding, who you've chatted to, who's the Dame this year, playing Sister this year in St Albans. They're brilliant at this art form, and unfortunately, there aren't many other places where they can ply their trade at the moment. So pantomime is where they can do it and where they can excel.
It is also, we have a really short rehearsal period, really, and that's very deliberate. It's not just sort of, to keep costs down or whatever, or to reduce commitment from TV stars or whatever. It's quite deliberate, because the show totally changes when you've got the audience there, and to rehearse a show too much without the audience, it's too big a leap then when the audience join in, because they're so vital. They're such an important, they're like another character in the show. And we sort of know, Paul particularly can guess exactly how the audience are going to react, but you don't know until that day and the first performance. And so it's really important you've got to have everything ready to go for when the audience are there, but you don't want to go too far without the audience, I think. Paul?
No, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to. I don't think you can over-rehearse pantomime. You've got to rehearse it. It's got to be slick. It's got to be professional. Everybody's got to know what they're doing. But the audience is the other cast member that wasn't in the rehearsal room. Yeah. That's the truth of it. And it's like, like you say, when you're experienced, believe it or not, I was working out, this is my 40th year in pantomime, because I did my first pantomime when I was 18. Not giving away my age, but there you go. And it's like, so I do feel, okay, I know how an audience is going to react. But to be honest, when you've got 1,200 people there, or however many people, they're a beast, and they can, and a children's matinee is very different from a Saturday night audience, and you have to be prepared for that. But you can't totally rehearse for that. You have to be a little bit flexible and a little bit fluid in your rehearsal process, I think. Yeah.
You've got 10 performances this year, 10 productions rather, going right from York down to Canterbury. How do you keep track of all of those productions and keep the quality control?
Get in the car and drive a lot.
Yeah, a lot. We
quite deliberately stick to just doing 10 shows. so that Paul can write all the scripts, and so that between us we can direct quite a few of the shows, or have our in-house team directing the shows, so that we very much, before the show leaves, we know it's formed in our image, particularly Paul's image, Paul's creative image, and then we go and visit an awful lot. We just don't stop. As soon as the shows are on, we try and get to see each one at least once a week and read rehearsal reports and show reports, those kind of things. And it doesn't stop until the final performance, really. So it's important. You never want to turn up and a new gag's gone in and you didn't know, and it's not quite to our taste or something like that, So we take it really personally. We're very, very hands-on.
And we love it, we really do. This is actually our 20th year. So Emily and I mean, we've been together. We met in pantomime, bizarrely, here at the Marlow Theatre, the old Marlow, in a production of Beauty and the Beast, which I'm currently directing. It. Beauty and the Beast hasn't been back to the Marlow in all that time. So that was 27 years ago, 27 years ago. And then Evolution has been going 20 years. So this is our 20th year, and we've still got the same love and passion for it, which is great, because we keep saying, is this ever going to run out? Is there going to come a time when you think, I don't want to drive all the way up there to do that? Whereas we don't do that. We are excited about it every day, which is brilliant. And we've got 3 kids, and you can imagine bringing up 3 kids. I mean, they're all a little bit older now, but they're still, if they're still in their teens, so parenting has its own challenges. So doing that whilst producing 10 large-scale pantomimes can be difficult, but we're still as passionate as ever, aren't we?
Yeah, we really are. Absolutely. Can't ever see it stopping.
No.
What's a family Christmas like for you then?
Bonkers. It's mad. So we always have an open house policy. So we live quite close to Canterbury. So anyone from Canterbury who can't get home is invited to our house. So over the years we've had all sorts. We've had motorbike stunt riders. We've had ensemble members, genies, all of that mixed with my family.
African tumblers. We've had literally last year we had, I think 20. I think there were 22 around the Christmas dinner table. Yeah,
it's mad. Yeah. It's not a day off. I can tell you that. It's not a day off, but it's always really fun. And it's mad. My 100-year-old granny was at the Christmas table next to a Brazilian stunt rider, and it's always mad, but it's always been that way. And that's actually, my family did this job before me, and that's how I grew up. And I think it's really nice, and it's a nice sort of Christmas message, isn't it? The door should always be open, and share your food. I like it.
So what do the kids think of it? Do they talk about it?
They adore it. And actually, sometimes, some years, it's like, do you know what? I think everyone can get home. No one needs us. It's just family. And they're like, oh, no, so boring. So, they adore it. They really like it. It's always, it's fun and a bit wild. We like it.
So your 10 shows, the scripts, Paul, you do all the scripts. How fresh are they each year? Are they brand new 10 shows, or are they taken from past years?
So I'd have a base script, So this year's, for example, just because I'm here, the Marlow Theatre, it's Beauty and the Beast. So our production of Beauty and the Beast was in Sheffield at the Lyceum last year. But what I do is, take the base script, and you might look at what worked and what didn't work. And then obviously all the jokes about the local area. And, we have great dames in each of our shows. So writing for their particular skills and the way they are. And then obviously whoever your star name is, so last year in Sheffield, the star name was Duncan James from Blue. So obviously there's a lot of stuff about Blue, Duncan, pop star, that sort of thing. Whereas this year it's Maisie Smith from EastEnders. So it's changing all that really. But I'd say I try to keep it fresh, and change the jokes, because I always think it shouldn't feel stale. Nothing should feel like you seen it before. I always think pantomime, it should be familiar. So everybody who comes, this is the Marlow Theatre pantomime. Yeah, of course it is. This is what we know. Or the Sheffield Lyceum pantomime, or the Theatre 7 pantomime in Shrewsbury. Whatever, they come and they know and they love what it is. So it's got to have that feeling of familiarity. They've got, so you can't change it radically. But within that familiarity, there's got to be originality because you can't give them the same every year. So that's my job, is to make it feel fresh and original within those parameters of familiarity. That's what I try to do. So, the people who will come to this show, it's the Marlow Theatre pantomime. We know we love this. Oh, that's new. That's different. That's original. That's my job. It
shouldn't feel like something corporate that was somewhere else last year. Exactly.
That's what I definitely try to avoid. And I'd like to think it never feels like that. We change the music every year. Some songs would be the same, obviously, but and the jokes, I try and make the jokes fresh. And as I say, to suit each theatre has its own little catchphrases and little quirks that everybody loves. Which you have to do. So. Yeah.
How much do the performers, because the performers, a lot of them are specialists in comedy or and various things. So how much do they contribute to the scripts?
Yeah. Well, I'd write the script, so they get the script and we'd rehearse with the script. But of course, when you're dealing with people like that, they're very talented comedians or comedy actors in their own right, and they might have ideas, and once again, great. I like to think of it, I'm a big football fan, so I always think about it in football terms. You've got a very gifted footballer. Well, you don't tell that footballer he's got to play in one way. If the footballer wants to try and play in a different way, of course, let's try that, let's see if that works, as long as it stays within those parameters. I think for us, we have a definite style. I think our shows are a definite style. So as long as it's within that, great. If that idea is better than my idea, let's go with that idea. Brilliant.
Yeah. So your Evolution Productions, how has your style evolved over 20 years?
I think we're known for good. All of our shows across all 10 shows are high quality. The production values are high quality. I would say this, the scripts I think are genuinely funny. Of course, I'd say that. Maybe you should say that, Ed. No, but, that's, I think, high production values. The scripts are funny. I personally don't like anything, I'm not a fan of innuendo. So my shows are very clean. And I like to think they have, an element of wit to them. So I like to think it works on two levels, that the adults can come and think, oh, that's funny. That's genuinely funny. That's clever. That's witty, And then the kids have all the stuff for the audience, the audience participation.
And the physical comedy for the kids.
And the physical comedy and the lights and the costumes and So I think, spectacle, production values, comedy, and consistency. Maybe consistency is the thing that I think.
We've got a style of casting, I think, which is, we really sort of look after and invest in star names who are of our style. So really talented people, but who can really do it. Like Duncan James and Maisie Smith and Sam Womack. We've got this year, names who aren't just somebody off the telly, the kind of names who maybe you were referring to earlier, people who really bring an extra element and who are surprising. I mean, Maisie Smith we thought she'd be good. We didn't realize she was going to be quite as
she's brilliant,
astounding as she is. And she's a really good, strong girl, which I've always liked that. And I think evolution and evolving, to have seen female characters come to the fore a little bit more in our shows over the last 20 years. And Maisie, I mean, she's a pocket rocket. She's a really good, strong female presence on that stage. For a while, I think some female heroines in the pantomimes were a bit wet and just there to look pretty and be kissed awake at the end. And we don't do that. That's one thing I do really like and appreciate about Paul's scripts, actually, is think you're quite a feminist inside, aren't you, Paul? Paul, right?
Well, you can imagine with Emily and our daughter Poppy, who's 15 now. I don't think we get away with weak female characters.
I don't think some of the male characters were any better. The lead male characters were any better in panto, were they?
Maybe, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I think that's definitely an evolution that our shows have seen, and I think that's been great. Yeah,
totally.
What direction have pantos been going in over that time, though? Because they do evolve and change. That's probably why they're still successful.
Well, I think it is. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Why is pantomime still filling theatres, not just our theatre, across the country? It's the lifeblood of theatre. Why is that? It could have very easily, you were talking about, shows in the 80s and 90s. It could have faded away then because, I don't think in the 80s and 90s they were getting audiences like we get now. And I'm talking sort of, not just our company, across the board. So it could have died away, but you hit our companies, you said evolve. Our company's called Evolution. Pantomime has to evolve. And I think it actually constantly has evolved. Sometimes it might have been slightly behind the curve. I think these days we have to try and stay ahead of the curve, but it does have to evolve, and it has evolved, and that's why it's as popular now, if not more popular than it's ever been. It's quite an unusual genre. I think it really. It's so unusual when you analyse it, and maybe it's best not to analyse it too much. You don't pull at that string, do you? But why is it? Well, it's for the whole family, I guess. And I guess at the moment there are people like us and like Michael at Crossroads who, and Sarah and Stephen Imagine, who really care about it, genuinely passionate about it. And maybe in the past, it was more of a cash cow for people. I don't know. I'm just trying to think why is it like it is at the moment? And I think people care just more about it now. There's a lot more effort being put into all the shows across the board, I think. That's my opinion. Having seen a lot of shows, it's in a good place, I think.
Yeah. You said about looking ahead, trying to stay ahead of the curve, because there's a lot of concentration on things that panto might not have done so well, like representations of you mentioned of women, of young women, but also certain races. We've had criticism of things like Aladdin and...
we changed. I mean, we did Aladdin last year here at the Marlow Theatre, which is a massive, we sold 95,000 tickets, something, and incredible. And that was, well, it wasn't a risk because we knew what it was going to be, but there was a discussion like, is it right to do Aladdin? Well, what we did was, we brought on board Daniel York Lowe as a sensitivity reader to read the script and to look at all the costumes and to look at all the sets and say, okay, what do you think of this, Daniel? And Daniel was very, very complimentary about what we did, because what we did was take away all those tropes that you might associate with Aladdin and that might make people nervous. We just took all those out, and guess what? It's still a great story without all of that. You don't need all of that. So we didn't have any. The character wasn't called Wishy-Washy, not even Widow Twanky. We changed all the names. We changed the setting. We changed. There was none of that music that you might associate. So it's like, but it's still a great show. So you can do all those shows, and pantomime can work without all those, let's say, old-fashioned tropes.
Yeah. What do you think the essential ingredients are to a good panto? Because sometimes audiences say that there's certain things that weren't in a panto, they miss it, like a good slosh scene or a sing-along, or what do you think's got to be in there for your pantos?
Very good question. Comedy. I would always put comedy first, because I think people want to laugh, especially at the moment, more than ever. So I would say, I personally, Emily might put story, but this is good because, you need story, and story's got to be up there as well. So plot and comedy are very important. I always think, what people really want from a pantomime is to have a good time. That's the first thing. Yeah. Now, not far behind that is a good story, and then also up there is really strong casting, all these three things. So comedy, plot, casting, probably for me, comedy, casting, What? But then plot is important. You've got to have the story. Of course you have. But me personally, what do I think people want? They want to have a good time. That's what they want. That's what they want from this genre. So, and then, after that, spectacle, great production values, slosh, maybe, sometimes slosh, sometimes not every year. Sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. What do you think, Em? Because, it's interesting on these things. Even Emily and I, we run the business together. We have different opinions, but...
Yeah. Well, interesting. I was just thinking about theatres programming, because comedy sells really well for theatres. When they have the one night, a comedian in for one night, that sells really well. And musical theatre sells really well. And I think pantomime is a really nice mixture of your stand-up comedy and musical theatre, and being of the production values need to be the standard of those big musical theatre shows that tour around. Interestingly, I think people really like variety, and they get it in things like Britain's Got Talent. That's why those shows are so popular. But we don't have much variety at all in theatre, live theatre. Pantomime is the only genre really where you do see that. You don't really get those sort of summer seasons.
Well, that's really interesting.
Maybe it's a bit of that.
Well, it's interesting you started with Crazy Gang. Well,
yeah.
Pantomime is the Crazy Gang with a plot and musical theatre. You know what I mean? It literally, I watched recently, actually, that Crazy Gang. It was their last ever show. You can watch it on, I don't know if you've ever seen it, David. It's on YouTube. No. So if you type in the Crazy Gang last ever show into YouTube, you get that show. Well, a lot of the stuff it's so familiar, not necessarily the jokes, but it's a great big variety show. Now, the trick isn't it, is how you weave that sort of chaos, it's chaotic when you watch it, but hilarious, how you weave that into a story, and with, as Emily says, musical theatre, high quality musical theatre. So it's all of those things coming together, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you analyse it.
Yeah. And a bit of, just to get, a bit profound, people have always, we like telling stories, don't we? And we like morality. We were talking, Paul went to see Heretic yesterday, a film, we were talking about morality, actually. And, at its heart as well, pantomime's got a great, strong story normally.
It's usually always good against evil, pretty much always good against evil, so there's a strong message there.
Yeah,
for kids, which is very, very important, I think, without preaching. It is interesting when you sort of start to analyse what it is and why it is. Quality, I guess. What would you say?
I think more and more these days, I think with families being a bit more dissipated, we're always moaning at our teenage daughter not to sit in her room on her phone. Come and sit with us. You want your family to be together. And I think particularly at Christmas, people get a little bit sentimental about having Nan round and, having the kids. It's a real opportunity. There's not many opportunities to do something with the whole family, with everyone, or with, what other form do you have where you got, 1,000 school kids 1 minute, load of office parties another, families, and everyone's there. It's mad. I can't think of anything else that has it. So it's joyful seeing something so broad, something so appealing. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's sort of, it sounds like when theatre mattered, like in the Elizabethan outdoor theatres in Shakespeare's time, where you had the lords.
I think it is. Yeah,
or in Greek times.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I always say it's really interesting what these stories are. I always say Star Wars is like, if you look at the characters in Star Wars, well, George Lucas, famously sort of nicked that from, the Greek mythology. But when you look at the characters in Star Wars and analyse what they are, they're the characters in any pantomime, because you've got a prince and a princess, or you've got Luke who's Jack, or Aladdin. You've got Princess Jasmine, Leia. You've got Darth Vader who's the baddie. You've got two comedy sidekicks. You've got a sort of Obi-Wan Kenobi who's a sort of slightly ethereal, the fairy or whatever it might. I see how stories work. This is why it's really, because they're really great stories. You know, when you boil it down, you always go, oh, yeah, it's Star Wars, the pantomime. I see why these things are really popular.
Also, I was listening to Mark Strong yesterday talk about Oedipus, about the new production of Oedipus and the reworking of it. And he was talking about, in Greek times, there'd be the central story, but they would expect it to be reworked every year, you know, a new version of Oedipus. It wouldn't have stood still. It would always, they'd rework that year's Oedipus, you know. And he was saying that was just what was expected. And I was listening to him thinking, well, it's just like pantomime. We just still Snow White, but we just tell it in a slightly different way. And I think pantomime probably is the art form, you know, the current art form. It reflects society.
You're right in the middle, right in the thick of your 10 pantos for this year. How soon do you start thinking about next year? Or have you already?
A month ago.
Yeah, or 2 months ago, you know, we started talking to the theatres in September about next year's shows, because what we do, in every theatre, we go on sale on the opening night for next year's show. So when we open here, next year's show goes on sale. So in every theatre, we already know what next year's show is. So yeah, I mean, it's a sort of 14, 15-month process. So we're constantly thinking about, okay, what's the subject there in that theatre, which sets and which costumes are going to go to that theatre, you know, which stars we might use. We already start talking to the star names, and the dames, of course, who are the constants. You know, we're constantly having conversations with them about, okay, are you okay for another year? Yeah, great. You know, so yeah, the conversation goes on. I mean, it's a 15-month process, would you say, Anne?
Definitely, at least. And from a business point of view, you know, which, because it is show business, we always say, and Paul is the show and I'm the business, you know, you can invest in things knowing, okay, well, that will be in this venue this year and there next year. You know, it does help the whole model. You know, you can amortize it. But yeah, no, it's right from the start.
That was Emily Wood and Paul Hendy from Evolution Productions, whose 20th anniversary panto season in 2024 will run at theatres in Canterbury, Sheffield, Northampton, York, St Albans, Crawley, Dunstable, Shrewsbury, Lichfield and Basildon. Paul's play The Last Laugh will run at London's Noël Coward Theatre from the 25th of February to the 22nd of March 2025. For more information on everything the company is doing, see www.evolution-productions.co.uk. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.